The train whistle sliced through the dry air as Rebecca Lawson steadied herself on the platform's edge. She gripped her worn leather suitcase tighter, her knuckles whitening against the handle. The locomotive behind her hissed steam into the afternoon sky, already pulling away from this dusty speck of a town. She smoothed her blue cotton dress and took a deep breath. 27 years old and halfway across the country to marry a man she'd never met. The letters from Walter Green had promised a good life on his cattle ranch. He'd written of needing a wife, of building a future together. Rebecca spotted him immediately among the small crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick mustache and expensive boots. His eyes found her, traveled down to her right leg, then hardened like river stones. "You didn't mention no Limp in your letters," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I..." Rebecca started, but Walter was already shaking his head. "I can't have no crippled woman. Ranch works hard enough." He turned away, climbing onto his wagon. "Town's got a boarding house. Good luck to you." The wagon wheels kicked up dust that settled on Rebecca's skirts as Walter Green disappeared down the road. She stood alone, strangers' eyes burning into her back, some with pity, others with curiosity. Samuel Hayes watched from the shadow of the general store porch. He'd come to town for supplies, not to witness a woman's humiliation. But something in the way she stood there, chin raised despite the trembling of her lower lip, made it impossible to look away. The Broken Wheel Ranch sat 17 miles outside of town, nestled against rolling hills that turned gold in summer. Samuel had built it with his own hands 15 years ago, when hope still lived in his chest. The main house was solid pine, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, and a front porch that caught the sunset. He'd built the second bedroom for the children he and Mary would have. Then came the fever that took both Mary and their infant son in a single merciless week. Samuel had nailed the door shut and never opened it again. Now he lived in the quietness of routine. Up before dawn, tending cattle, mending fences, eating simple meals alone at a table meant for a family. At night, he'd sit on the porch and smoke his pipe, watching darkness claim the land, listening to the hollow echo of his own existence. Samuel never planned to speak to the woman from the train. But when he finished loading his supplies and saw her still sitting on a bench outside the station 3 hours later, something shifted inside him. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "You waiting on someone?" Rebecca looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "No, sir. Just gathering my thoughts." Samuel nodded toward his wagon. "Town's boarding house is full up with railroad men. I heard the owner turn away 2 people already today." "I see." Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted the fabric of her skirt. "I could give you a ride somewhere if you need. I don't have anywhere to go." The simple truth of it hung between them. Samuel cleared his throat. "I have a proposition, ma'am. Not the kind you're thinking," he added quickly. "I've got a ranch. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, free and clear. I need someone to keep house and you need somewhere to go. Are you offering me employment, Mr. Hayes?" "Samuel Hayes. And no, not employment exactly." He removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "I'm offering marriage." Rebecca's laugh was sharp, disbelieving. "You don't know the first thing about me. I know you came a long way to start a new life. I know you've got courage." His eyes met hers. "And I know what it's like to be alone. Why would you marry a stranger with a bad leg? My leg works fine. Figure between us we've got 3 good ones. That's enough to stand on." Rebecca studied him, the sun-weathered face, the clear eyes that looked directly at her, not past her or through her. "It wouldn't be a real marriage," Samuel continued. "Just a practical arrangement. You'd have your own room, your own privacy. But you'd have a home, and I'd have someone to cook meals and keep things in order." Rebecca looked down the empty street, then back at Samuel. "When would this arrangement begin?" "Judge Wilson's office is just down the street. He could marry us before sundown." The Broken Wheel Ranch came into view as the wagon crested a hill. Rebecca saw a modest house with smoke curling from the chimney, a barn, corrals, and open land stretching toward distant mountains. "It's not much," Samuel said. "It's more than I had this morning," Rebecca replied. The house smelled of dust and coffee and loneliness. Samuel showed her to a small bedroom with a narrow bed and a chest of drawers. Kitchen stocked. Outhouse is out back. Water pumps on the porch. His words came out clipped, as if he'd forgotten how to speak to another person. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Give you some privacy." "Mr. Hayes." Samuel, you don't need to sleep in the barn. This is your home. It's yours now, too, Mrs. Hayes." The name felt strange, a coat that didn't quite fit. They stood awkwardly until Samuel nodded and left her alone with her suitcase and the silence. Days passed in careful orbits. Samuel rose before dawn, worked until dusk. Rebecca cooked, cleaned, mended his clothes. They ate meals together at the pine table, exchanging few words. At night, they retreated to separate rooms. But slowly, the house began to change. Rebecca hung curtains she'd sewn from flour sacks. She placed wildflowers in jars on the windowsills. She hummed as she worked, her voice filling spaces that had known only silence for years. Samuel found himself lingering at meals, watching her hands as she poured coffee or cut bread. He noticed how she favored her right leg but never complained, how she gripped the back of a chair when pain flickered across her face. One evening, returning from the fields, he heard her laugh, a sound so unexpected it stopped him in his tracks. She was feeding scraps to a stray dog that had wandered onto the property, talking to it in a soft voice he'd never heard her use. "You're making friends," he said. Rebecca startled. "I hope you don't mind. He just showed up hungry." "No, I don't mind." Samuel watched the dog lean into her touch. "House feels different with you here." "Different good or different bad?" "Good," he said. "Different good." Rebecca smiled, and something warm spread through Samuel's chest, an unfamiliar feeling he couldn't name. But Rebecca kept her distance. The rejection at the train station had cut deeper than she let on. Each night, she wrote in her journal by lamplight, pouring out fears she couldn't speak aloud. Would Samuel grow tired of her too? Would he one day look at her limp with the same disgust Walter Green had shown? One afternoon, while Rebecca was in town getting supplies, Samuel was repairing a leak in the roof. Rain had seeped into the bedroom Rebecca used, dampening some of her belongings. As he moved her small trunk to check the floorboards, a leather-bound journal fell open. He meant to close it immediately, but his eye caught his own name, and before he could stop himself, he read, "Samuel watched me struggle with the water bucket today. I saw pity in his eyes, the same look I've known all my life. I wish just once someone would see beyond this broken body to who I am inside. Before my fever, I danced. I ran. I climbed trees. Sometimes I dream I'm still that girl, and when I wake, the loss is fresh again. I'm grateful for Samuel's kindness, for this roof and these walls. But I long for more than gratitude. I want to be wanted. I've started sketching designs again, dresses, shirts, things I could sew and perhaps sell. In my old life, people respected my needlework even if they pitied the hands that held the needle. Maybe someday I could have a little shop in town. A place that's mine. A purpose beyond being someone's burden." Samuel closed the journal, shame burning his face. He carefully returned it to the trunk, his mind racing with what he'd read. That night, he couldn't meet Rebecca's eyes across the dinner table. 3 days later, Samuel hitched the wagon before dawn. "I'll be gone all day," he told Rebecca over breakfast. "Business in town." She nodded, not asking questions. They'd settled into this careful dance of proximity without intimacy. Samuel returned after dark. Rebecca was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. "I thought you might have left for good," she said, only half joking. Samuel sat beside her on the step. "I've been thinking about things." "About us?" Rebecca tensed. "I see. No, you don't." Samuel's voice was gentle. When Mary died, my first wife, I thought that was the end of everything. I nailed up that room and figured I'd nailed up my heart too. Rebecca waited, hardly breathing. I didn't marry you out of pity, Rebecca. I married you because when I saw you standing on that platform, not breaking even when that fool Green tried to break you, I recognized something in you that I'd lost. Strength. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. I bought the old milliner's shop in town today. It's small, but it's got good light and a back room for living quarters if needed. Rebecca took the paper with trembling hands. I don't understand. It's yours. The deed's in your name. Samuel looked out at the darkening land. I read your journal. I'm sorry for that. But I read about your dream of having a shop, of making things with your hands. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. Why would you do this? Because I want you to stay with me. Not out of necessity or convenience, but because you choose to. Samuel's voice roughened. I want you to have a purpose that's yours and a home that's ours. If you'll have it. Have me. Rebecca stared at the deed, then at Samuel. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything tonight. Just know that when I look at you, I don't see a limp. I see the woman who brought my house back to life. Who might do the same for me if given the chance. Rebecca reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. I've been afraid, she admitted. Afraid you'd wake up one morning and regret bringing me here. The only regret I have is all the years I spent alone when I could have been looking for you. They sat in silence as stars appeared overhead. The stray dog Rebecca had befriended settled at their feet with a contented sigh. I think, Rebecca said finally, I would like to try being married for real. Samuel's hand tightened around hers. I'd like that too. The next morning, they walked together to the nailed-shut door. Samuel hesitated, then pried the nails loose one by one. The room beyond was dusty, frozen in time, filled with the ghosts of what might have been. We don't have to use it, Rebecca said softly. No, Samuel replied. But we don't have to keep it closed either. Not anymore. They stood together in the doorway, letting light into the darkness. Rebecca leaned against Samuel, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, supporting her without making her feel weak. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the Broken Wheel Ranch, a place that, for the first time in 15 years, finally felt like home.